You are standing in a room you cannot see. The air tastes metallic. Above you, a sun that has never burned hydrogen into helium pours down its manufactured heat. Your boots, scuffed, theatrical, press into something that feels like sand, but isn't. It compresses wrong. The silence around you is not the silence of space. It is the silence of a soundstage at 3 in the morning, when the crew has gone home and the cameras sleep like metal insects. You do not know this yet, but your body knows. Your body always knows when something is wrong. 60 million miles away, or perhaps 60 feet, humanity is watching. They are weeping. They are praying. They are seeing what they need to see. Proof that we are magnificent, that we can escape our cradle, that God or physics or sheer human audacity has granted us passage to another world. But you are here, in this room, and the shadows falling across your suit stretch in directions that make geometry scream. The flag beside you trembles, though there is no wind, no atmosphere, nothing but the breath of a ventilation system disguised as the void. This is not the moon. This is something else entirely. The photograph will hang in textbooks for generations. Children will memorize the names of heroes. But if you look closely, if you let your eyes adjust to the wrongness, you begin to see the seams. The light source that should be singular, a distant star burning with the fury of 93 million miles, instead behaves like a collection of stage lamps. Shadows fork. They diverge. They obey rules written not by celestial mechanics, but by union electricians and directors with budgets and deadlines. You crouch down. Your gloved hand reaches for the surface. It should be regolith, ancient, pulverized by 4 billion years of micrometeorite bombardment, each grain a tiny fossil of violence. Instead, it feels like sand from a quarry in Nevada, trucked in by the ton, spread across a warehouse floor, and raked into dunes by set designers who have never left Earth's atmosphere. The texture is wrong. The color is wrong. When you lift your hand, the dust clings in ways that betray gravity 1/6 too strong. Above you, the sky should be a cathedral of stars. Thousands of them, millions, unfiltered by atmosphere, undiminished by pollution or cloud, each one a needle of light stabbing through the black. But when you look up, you see nothing. A darkness so complete it feels painted on. No Milky Way, no constellations, no cosmic context to anchor your smallness against infinity. Just a flat, matte blackness that smells faintly of polyurethane and stage paint. The camera is watching. It is always watching. Its lens does not blink. You move carefully, remembering the choreography drilled into you over months of rehearsal. Step, pause, turn. Speak the words written for you. Plant the flag. Salute the fabric that shivers, impossibly, blasphemously, in a vacuum that should be as still as death itself. The microphone taped against your throat picks up your breathing. It should not. In true vacuum, sound is a refugee with nowhere to run. But here, in this manufactured nowhere, your exhalations rattle and hiss with the clarity of a telephone call. Radiation should be cooking you. The Van Allen belts, twin halos of trapped protons and electrons circling Earth like the rings of a malevolent Saturn, should have turned your cells into chaos. The dosage required to pass through them, to survive the journey, to endure the solar wind and cosmic rays beyond Earth's magnetic embrace, should leave you vomiting, your DNA unzipping like a broken ladder. But you feel fine. You feel exactly as healthy as someone who has spent the last 3 days in a climate-controlled facility in the American Southwest, eating catered meals and sleeping in a bed with springs. The mathematics do not cooperate. Engineers will later calculate that the computing power required to navigate 250,000 miles to land on a moving target with no GPS, no ground control capable of real-time correction, amounts to less processing capability than a modern wristwatch. The lunar module, a craft that looks like it was assembled from foil and curtain rods in a high school theater department, supposedly survived temperatures swinging between 270 degrees Fahrenheit and sunlight and 250 below in shadow. Its hull, thinner than the skin of an airplane, held pressure against the sucking void. Its engine fired perfectly, its ascent stage launched flawlessly. No test runs, no margin for error. First try, perfect execution 6 times in a row. You begin to feel the weight of the lie, not the physical weight. You are too light here. Everything is too light, but the ontological mass of a deception this vast. Somewhere, officials are making calculations. The Cold War is a knife pressed against the throat of the world. The Soviet Union has beaten America into orbit, beaten them to the first satellite, the first man, the first woman, the first spacewalk. Defeat is intolerable. Humiliation is a luxury reserved for nations without nuclear arsenals. So a decision is made in rooms you will never enter, by men whose names you will never learn. If we cannot go to the moon, we will make the moon come to us. Stanley Kubrick has just finished filming 2001, A Space Odyssey. The special effects are astonishing, so convincing that audiences leave theaters dizzy, unable to distinguish between cinema and documentary. The technology exists. The talent exists. The motivation exists. All that remains is execution and silence. The latter is easier than you think. Threaten a man's family. Threaten his legacy. Offer him money or oblivion. Most choose money. A few choose oblivion and are granted it. The footage that will be broadcast to the world suffers from curious technical problems. The original tapes, the highest quality recordings, the ones that should be archived with the care reserved for sacred relics, will vanish. NASA will claim they were recorded over, reused, lost. The most important visual documentation in human history erased like a grocery list. What remains is a copy of a copy, degraded, grainy, conveniently obscuring details that might invite scrutiny. When independent researchers enhance the images, they find anomalies, objects in the background that resemble stage lights, reflections in helmet visors that show figures unaccounted for in the official crew manifest, wires, thin, almost invisible, supporting equipment that should be held down by lunar gravity alone. The rocks brought back are real. This is indisputable. They are old, ancient, born in fire that predates the dinosaurs. But rocks can be collected by unmanned probes. The Soviet Luna missions did exactly this, scooping samples and returning them to Earth without risking human lives or requiring elaborate hoaxes. The presence of lunar material proves only that we reached the moon with robots, not that we set foot on it with flesh. Astronauts return as heroes. They are paraded through cities. They shake hands with presidents. But their eyes are wrong. In interviews, they hesitate. They choose words too carefully. When asked about the stars, about the beauty, about the existential weight of standing on another world, their answers sound rehearsed, hollow, like actors who have forgotten their motivation. Some refuse to discuss it at all. One will punch a man in the face for calling him a liar. The violence so sudden and uncharacteristic, it feels like the snap of a wire pulled too tight for too long. You realize that if this is true, if you are standing not on the moon, but on a set, not in the vacuum of space, but in the controlled environment of a terrestrial facility, then everything you thought you knew about trust, about institutions, about the fundamental reliability of shared reality is negotiable. If they can fake this, they can fake anything. History becomes a choose-your-own adventure novel, written by those with the budgets and the will to manufacture consensus. The flag continues to move, frame by frame, in footage slowed down and analyzed by engineers and obsessives and believers in uncomfortable truths. You can see it ripple. The fabric behaves as if touched by air currents, by the circulation of ventilation systems, keeping a crew alive in an enclosed space. On the moon, it should hang limp unless physically disturbed. And even then, in 1/6 gravity, its motion should be slow, dreamlike, alien. Instead, it flutters with the familiarity of a flag on a windless day on Earth, responding to pressures that should not exist. the temperature differential presents another impossibility. Film, physical, chemical film, has a narrow operating range, too hot, and the emulsion melts, the image is bleeding into incoherence. Too cold, and it becomes brittle, shattering like glass. The cameras used, mounted on chests, exposed to the full brutality of unfiltered solar radiation and the absolute zero of shadow, should have failed. Yet every shot is perfectly exposed, every frame is pristine. The photographic record is flawless in ways that professionals in extreme environment photography find suspicious. You stand at the edge of the crater. It should be deep, carved by the exhaust of the descent engine, a torch of fire that would have scoured the surface, blasting away dust and leaving a visible mark of arrival. But beneath the lander, the ground is undisturbed. The footprints nearby are crisp, detailed, as if pressed into damp sand. The lander's pads rest on a surface that shows no evidence of the violence required to bring it to rest. The crosshairs in some photographs appear behind objects. This should be impossible. The crosshairs are etched onto the camera lens, part of the optical system, always in the foreground of any image. Yet in certain frames, they seem to vanish behind foreground elements, as if the images have been composited, layered, assembled from multiple sources. The explanation offered involves overexposure, bleeding, technical artifacts. But to some eyes, it looks like the mistake of an editor working with physical prints, cutting and pasting before Photoshop, before digital, in an era when special effects were tangible, manual, prone to human error. If you've come this far, you're already questioning what you thought was real. There's no turning back now. The psychological operation, if that is what this is, relies on the audience's desperate need to believe. We want to be the species that escapes. We want to be more than bacteria on a rock hurtling through indifferent void. The moon landing is not just a historical event. It is a myth in the oldest sense, a story we tell ourselves about who we are and what we are capable of. To challenge it is to challenge the narrative of progress, the sanctity of expertise, the notion that our institutions serve truth rather than power. You think about the engineers, the mathematicians, the thousands of people involved in the Apollo program. Could they all be complicit? Could such a secret survive decades without a single credible whistleblower? But you forget, most of them would have been working on real components, real systems, believing in the mission's authenticity. Only a handful would need to know. The astronauts, the directors, the architects of the deception. Everyone else is simply doing their job, contributing pieces to a puzzle they assume is legitimate. Compartmentalization is the oldest trick in the manual of secrecy. The Soviet Union never called it out. This is perhaps the most compelling argument for authenticity. Why would they remain silent if their greatest adversary was perpetrating a fraud? But consider, what if they knew and chose silence because their own space achievements were similarly fabricated? What if the Cold War was theater, a grand opera performed for populations who needed enemies, needed competition, needed to believe that the existential terror of mutual assured destruction was justified by tangible accomplishments? What if both sides agreed, tacitly or explicitly, to honor each other's illusions because exposing one would unravel both? The lunar module ascent is captured on film. A camera left behind on the surface tilts upward and tracks the craft as it rises. This is cited as proof. Who operated the camera? Who adjusted its angle? The official explanation involves a timer, a pre-programmed tilt mechanism, a feat of remote engineering. But watching the footage, the motion is smooth, responsive, almost anticipatory. It tracks the ascent with the fluidity of a human operator, not the mechanical precision of an automated system. You begin to understand that proof, in this context, is a matter of epistemology. What do you accept as evidence? If you trust the institutions, the footage is documentation. If you distrust them, the same footage becomes Exhibit A in a criminal trial. The data does not change, only your willingness to believe in its chain of custody, its authenticity, its freedom from manipulation. The stars remain absent. This haunts you. In every image, in every frame of footage, the sky is a black nothing. NASA explains that the cameras were set for daylight exposures, optimized for the bright lunar surface, rendering the dimmer stars invisible. But photographers counter. With manual control, with longer exposures, the stars should be capturable. The absence feels deliberate, a stage set where painting a realistic star field was deemed too expensive or too risky, a detail that might invite expert scrutiny and reveal inconsistencies. The hammer and feather drop in perfect unison, demonstrating that all objects fall at the same rate in vacuum. It is a beautiful demonstration of Galilean physics, performed for the camera, educational and convincing, but it could be performed in a vacuum chamber on Earth. It proves the environment is airless, not that the environment is the moon. You are tired now. The cognitive dissonance is exhausting. Part of you wants to surrender, to accept the simple narrative, to stop interrogating shadows and crosshairs and flags. But another part, the part that feels the wrongness in your bones, cannot let go. Because if this is a lie, it is not just a historical footnote. It is a revelation about the nature of power, about the distance between what you are told and what is true. The dust kicked up by the rover wheels behaves strangely. It arcs in parabolas too tight, falls too quickly, as if subject to stronger gravity. In true lunar conditions with no air resistance, each particle should follow a perfect ballistic trajectory, hanging in the void longer than intuition expects. But in the footage, the dust falls like dust on Earth, betraying the presence of atmosphere or, at minimum, an environment denser than vacuum. You think about Gus Grissom, one of the original astronauts, who criticized the Apollo program publicly, who expressed doubts, who said in an interview that we were a long way from making it to the moon. Weeks later, he died in a cabin fire during a routine test, along with two other astronauts. The official investigation cited faulty wiring, poor design, negligence. But to some, it looks like a silencing, a message delivered with flame and smoke. Doubt this endeavor at your peril. The loneliness of this knowledge settles over you. If you speak it aloud, you become a pariah. You are labeled a conspiracy theorist, a crank, a fool who believes the earth is flat, and birds are surveillance drones. The social cost of skepticism is isolation, so most who doubt remain silent, nursing their suspicions in private, watching the footage late at night, tracing the shadows with their fingers, wondering if they are crazy or if the world is. You will never know for certain. That is the exquisite cruelty of it. The evidence is circumstantial, the arguments endlessly debatable, the experts divided or silenced or co-opted. The moon itself offers no testimony. It hangs in the sky, indifferent, reflecting light that may or may not have illuminated human footprints in its dust. What remains is the photograph. You, in your suit, standing on a surface that might be Nevada or the moon or some liminal space and in between, a place where truth and fiction collapsed into each other and became indistinguishable. The image will outlive you. It will be printed in books, displayed in museums, transmitted into deep space as a message to whatever might be listening. And always, for those with eyes willing to see, the shadows will fall wrong. The flag will tremble. The stars will be absent. You are alone with your doubt. The sun that is not the sun beats down. The silence that is not the silence of space presses against your ears. And somewhere, far away or very close, cameras are recording, preserving this moment for a species that needs to believe it touched the sky, even if it never left the ground.